Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And this earth, and then in a world we can't see. And then in a world we can't see.
By weighing the body of a man as he dies, Dr. Duncan McDougall is attempting to prove what all good Christians know, that we humans have souls. At the moment of death, the body of patient 1 loses 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. But McDougall needs more lives in the balance. A single result could always be dismissed as experimental error. He records a weight loss in his second and third patients. With his fourth patient, things don't go so well. Some believe what the doctor is doing is sacrilege.
Doctor. I trust you won't be much longer.
The hospital staff famously interrupted McDougall's experiment, and it could well be there's quite powerful superstitious belief that actually the soul is being endangered rather than measured. And there were very powerful popular superstitions that the soul had to actually get out of the body at one level, and it had to get out of the building at another level. So it's not unknown for people in McDougall's lifetime to be opening a hole in a roof, to be opening windows.
And that kind of superstition wrecks his fourth test.
Ma'am, I must protest. You have just ruined the experiment.
I'm so sorry.
The next death records a loss in weight of 3/8 of an ounce. McDougall now has 4 samples. All have lost weight. Has he measured his patients' departing souls? Or has he missed something?
Like any good scientist, McDougall then had to come up with alternative explanations for the weight that he had discovered in order to rule them out. The obvious option, of course, was the urine and the feces released by the subject upon death. But he argued that these weights were taken into account because they were on the bed with the patient at the time of death.
That's not the only variable. Could it be that he's just measuring the weight of their final breath?
He spent some time on the scale himself, breathing out really hard to see if that changed the way the scale registered, and it did not. So he accounted for those bits.
But McDougall's death watches don't sit well with the medical staff. Eventually, he's ejected from the home. He's forced to end his research.
Excuse me, nurse. I need my...
Uncertain how to proceed, McDougall keeps his experiments secret for 6 years until, in 1907, the New York Times breaks the story. He's forced to publish.
When McDougall published his results, people kind of went crazy. A lot of people questioned his methodologies, but they couldn't really offer any alternatives to account for the 21 grams that were missing.
The Cullis consumptive home had been a lucky break for McDougall. No one else will give him a chance to continue his work. With humans, at least. McDougall moves on to a new area of research, aiming to prove that not only do we have a soul, but that it is a gift given only to humans. And his results are exactly as he might have expected. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce of weight, 21 grams. He finds that when dogs die in his scale, 3/4 of an ounce He records no weight loss.
McDougall, I think, found what he wanted and what a lot of Christians would have wanted out of these dog experiments, that when they died, there was no perceptible weight loss, so no souls in animals.
His results perfectly match the fundamental Christian belief that humans have souls, but animals don't.
Given that when you stop breathing and your heart stops, and given that 10 seconds after that, that the EEG, the measure of electrical brain activity, goes absolutely flat, it's medically inexplicable that near-death experiencers are having a conscious experience. For years, however, some medical researchers had dismissed the NDE phenomenon as hallucinations caused by the dying body releasing a chemical cocktail as a means of defense against the pain and shock of impending death. That theory was dented in 1984 by an extraordinary medical emergency in the American West Coast city of Seattle. Maria, a migrant worker from Eastern Europe, was rushed to hospital after she collapsed at a friend's home. In the ICU, a medical team tried to stabilize her condition without success. Her heart stopped beating. Maria's body was lifeless for several minutes, but the doctors kept on trying to bring her back to life. Then they suddenly realized that the heart monitor showed some life. Maria was supposed to be dead. Maria came back to life and immediately told an amazing story. She saw everything while she left her body. She could see the medical team working on her. She then left the ICU to the roof of the hospital, and as she went up, saw a tennis shoe. No one believed her story, but her friends immediately ran up to the roof and with absolute shock found the tennis shoe exactly as described by Maria. Maria's experience could not be anything other than the absolute truth. If the out-of-body experience was purely a mental aberration, how could she have seen a physical reality that could later be verified?
So explain that to me. Explain that through chemicals or some of the other scientific explanations. Please explain to me why that man knows that.
There is no explanation for that in current neuroscience. I personally and professionally am not afraid of saying that I don't know, because that's the way we learn.
After she was wired up and in bed, I would then go off to another room, use a random number table to get a 5-digit random number, which I'd write on a piece of paper and slip it in an opaque folder. And then I'd come in and put it up on a shelf near the ceiling, a flat shelf. So the number was not visible to anyone down in the room, much less on the bed, but if you happened to be viewing the room from near the ceiling, you could clearly read the number. And I put a clock near the number also. And I told her, I mean, this sounds terribly preposterous, but I said, if you leave your body, try to float up to a position where you can not only read and memorize the number, but see what time it is also, and then try to wake up right afterwards so I can have an exact idea of when you had that particular part of the experience.
Tart changed the number every day. On the first 3 mornings, the woman said she felt as though she'd left her body during the night. But she couldn't say what the number was.
She said that while she was out of her body, she was in the wrong part of the room, or she was outside the building or something like that. She had no idea what the number was because she hadn't seen it.
Then, on the 4th night, the subject woke up suddenly at about 3:35 in the morning. She said she'd just had an out-of-body experience in which she'd risen to the top of the room. She claimed she had seen the number.
She successfully told me that the number was 25132. Now, the odds of guessing a 5-digit number like that in one try are enormous. So I was quite excited, to put it mildly.
Tart examined the EEG readings of the electrical activity produced by the woman's brain. At the point that she believed she left her body, They had changed dramatically.
I had looked at many brainwave patterns of sleep over the years, and her brainwaves were simply unlike anything I'd seen before.
When she had the OBE, the woman's brain was producing alpha waves. In the rest of us, these are produced in the waking state and are rarely seen during sleep. It seemed that while she was asleep, part of her brain was behaving as though it was awake.
Anyone who was familiar with sleep wave patterns looking at them would say, "This is unusual. I don't normally see this."
There's been a very good study of people that had cardiac arrests or heart attacks. About 15% of them had NDEs, and the remainder did not have NDEs. And then they studied this group of people for up to 7 years. And there's no question that the people that had NDEs were significantly different from the other group. They tended to have a more spiritual belief system. They had a much lower fear of death. They had a much less materialistic view of the world. They were much more interested in religion, and it really changed their lives a great deal. So this has been studied very carefully, or what is called prospective or controlled studies, and has been proven to be fact. The event is so common. The pattern of the experience is so consistent, and its effect on people is so profound, that just for that reason alone, even forgetting why or what the spiritual or religious implications are, NDEs are something that affect a lot of people in a major way. Research proves that near-death experience is legitimate. Nearly 12 to 15 million Americans have had NDE experiences. This is such an enormous number of shared experiences that so greatly affects their lives that no matter what the cause of NDE, no matter what your ideas about why it occurs, there is no question that given the number of lives that it has impacted, it makes sense to study it. It's an incredible phenomenon. And again, the implications are enormous.
Astral projection is kind of a generic term for an out-of-body experience, and it's commonly practiced in the occult, spiritual business, and in other spiritual disciplines. The consciousness of the person leaves the physical or corporal body and travels somewhere within the spiritual world independent of the body. Astral projection also includes other spiritual things like lucid dreaming and rising on the planets and that kind of thing, which I don't have time to go into today. But here you can see in these two incidents, Paul, he was harpazo, snatched up into heaven, and John uses different terminology here. He carried me in spirit, or I became in spirit. Okay, so here we have two instances where it appears that the inner man did leave the body. But here's the key to it. It was 100% God prompted. It wasn't them doing it. It was God doing it to them. The problem that we're running into now with people who are doing astral travel, I've had dozens of them in my office trying to get rid of powerful familiar spirits. It's a fight. Is that the person is trying to induce it themselves. If you are trying to induce astral travel yourself, right, that is extremely dangerous, and that is of Satan. You're probably going to pick up a familiar spirit. I have had dozens of charismatics and prophetics in my office that have come for counseling, trying to get rid of demons who have been involved in astral travel, and it has always been familiar spirits. And these people started out trying to develop their ability to do it. The second interesting thing about these two great men of God who were involved with astral travel is that it was all controlled by the Holy Spirit. It wasn't self-controlled. In other words, they weren't traveling on their own and doing it on their own. It was being done to them, and the Holy Ghost was controlling where they went, who they saw, who they met, and what happened when they did it. The problem with astral projection is that the person attempts to induce it themselves, and they go through a process in the satanic cults where you can train yourself to do it. And it does work. You can train yourself to be an astral projectionist. That's not somebody that works in a movie theater. I'm talking about spiritually leaving your body. It is possible to do it, and it is real. The problem is you're going to pick up familiar spirits, and you're going to be extremely infected. And then later on, you're going to develop strange physical illnesses in your body.
If your ultimate goal is to be famous, then you're gonna do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil.
Yeah. But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil. Sold my soul to the devil.
You know, a long time gone, I'm holding up my hand. What was your bargain? To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And this earth, and then in a world we can't see.
Heaven and hell is a reality. More and more scientific evidence proves that life after death does exist. Eventually, we will all die and have to cross the final frontier.